What's up, everybody? It's your co-host Posh. We're here on the Founder Hour podcast.
I'm Pat.
And we're here with Joe Fernandez, who is the co-founder and CEO of Joymode, and also was the founder of Klout before that. And we're excited to be here with you at the Joymode offices and to learn more about your journey and to give us some insight into what you're up to and what you've been up to leading up to today.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you guys for rolling down here to downtown LA. Excited to chat.
Awesome. So, Joe, we like to kick it off from the very beginning. Where were you born?
Las Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess like
Sin City.
Wasn't expecting that
You
one.
were born a sinner.
yeah, far east suburbs of LA, I guess.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Las Vegas.
And did your parents, did they live there from day one, or did they immigrate there, or what was their story?
So it's funny, my dad is born in Cuba, in Havana. His dad worked at a casino there. And when the revolution happened and the communist takeover in Cuba, that whole community fled. And somebody in that group ended up in Las Vegas. And then, how the kind of immigrant story.
Everyone tells their friends and they start moving there. Yeah.
So he moved to Las Vegas to continue working in casinos. And so my dad mostly grew up in Vegas, high school and stuff in Vegas. And so my family's been in Vegas for 60 years, which in Las Vegas time is 600 years.
Yeah.
And there's this weird Cuban community in Las Vegas around the casinos.
Was your dad in the casino business? Or?
Yeah, still is. Yeah,
nice.
so he's actually now out at Moronga,
nice.
out in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
It's the retirement circuit. And then my mom is from Iowa and just kind of took off after high school and ended up in Vegas. And she was a cocktail waitress and my dad was a dealer at Caesars. And it's kind of the Vegas love story, I guess.
Well, what was it like growing up there? Is there anything particular you remember from childhood that was different than growing up somewhere else, just growing up in Vegas?
Yeah, I think it's super weird. Now that having some distance from it, I can kind of have a sense it was normal then. It's such a, it was the fastest growing city in the U.S. for basically my whole youth. So so many new kids showing up to school, and then a month later, a big chunk of those kids would be gone. Their families moved to Vegas and then got caught up in gambling or whatever, and they'd have to leave. So it was this transactional nature of the city was really interesting. It was also kind of a wild spot because if you think about Las Vegas, it's a city who historically the whole economy was based on you being uneducated.
Yeah.
So we kind of got to run wild. It was street smart, not book smart.
Yeah.
And you always knew which friends' parents worked graveyard shift and whose house you could go to and or whose parents slept in the daytime. And, we were really allowed to kind of do anything.
Mm-hmm. And how far were you from the strip itself?
So the strip from my childhood home was probably 3 miles, super close.
So you used to hang out there?
Not really. So the city is really strict about kids, at least when I was growing up, about kids hanging out near the strip. If you think about it, the last thing they want is punk high school kids harassing tourists.
Right.
So it's a quick way to get beat down is hang around the strip.
And that was kind of I'm sure it was right before all that development outside of Vegas, right? Henderson kind of wasn't Henderson
that was
back then.
small. I mean,
yeah.
It's funny. We actually lived in Henderson when I was a kid, and I don't remember this, but my mom told me the phone lines didn't come out to our house yet.
Oh really?
We were there for 6 months before the phone lines.
I remember it was just all desert.
Yeah, it was just desert.
Nothing. Yeah.
Joe, did your parents, I know you mentioned that it was just kind of wild and, school wasn't necessarily an expectation. Did your parents ever, encourage you to go to school?
My parents were super hands off. Our house was kind of survival of the fittest. And it wasn't a neglect thing. If I needed anything, they were there, and we were very fortunate overall.
It's what a good boss should be like.
Yeah, they were just do your thing, deal with the consequences when that happens. So I was I think that gave me a lot of confidence in everything I've done, and is the sense that I was allowed to figure a lot of stuff out really young.
Is there an example that you could think of that really stands out to you as a kid where you kind of messed up or you did something where you didn't really have the answer, but you had to just kind of find it on your own? And
I think a pretty crazy one. When I was like 16, I basically took a combination of buses and trains from Las Vegas all the way to Boston. Wow. And was gone like almost 2 months.
I mean, was this you like running away from home type
no,
thing?
I was just like, oh, this summer I'm gonna go explore, and I like sent my parents like postcards from like Chicago and New York, and like this was like 93 or something, so it was like pre-cell phones.
Yeah.
So I was just like gone for this. And I remember like calling my mom, and she'd be like, "Oh, whatever friend's house you're at, you should probably come home. Their parents are probably getting sick of you." I was like, "No, I'm really like all the way across the country," and I'd like sent a postcard and stuff.
How'd you like survive in terms of like money?
I worked, so I'd saved up money. So I'd always been like kind of hustling and working and doing little businesses and stuff. So I'd have a little bit of money, and but I was allowed to just like do whatever I wanted. Like I don't think I showed my parents a report card after maybe like 4th grade.
Wow.
Like I could literally just like not go to school, do whatever, and so there was like no pressure.
Was that common, like just growing up in Vegas, or was it like just your family like that was like that?
I think we were on like the extreme end of it, but it was like it wasn't wildly different from other kids I knew.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do
you appreciate that looking back?
I do. I think it's like had a incredible impact on who I became. It's really weird now that I have kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and like want to instill that same confidence and kind of freedom in them, but it's like feels physically impossible to like. Though I don't know if it's because the world's changed, or like the pressure of being a parent has changed, or just like I don't know. It's like it's weird. I want them to have that same self-reliance, but it's like I don't know if I could pull it off.
What kind of things were you into when you were in high school? Like when you kind of came to that, like after maybe like around that time when you were like traveling, or even when you got back, like what did you like to do?
I was into kind of normal stuff, basketball and skateboarding and video games and that kind of thing. But I was always thinking about businesses, and like even in like middle school, I had kind of cornered the market in our school on video games, where I was like buying and selling video games, and I was one of the first
M-rated video games that you couldn't get like in the store,
like anything I get my hands on. And I was one of the first people. I like made my parents get the internet, and this again is like 91, 92, like early, and I would go on these like message boards and like basically I created a book of cheat codes, and I would print them and bind them, and I was selling them at school.
That was like gold.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was like, back then it was like you would call like a 1-900 number or something to like get to get past a level or something.
And then I remember like at some point the games like started releasing their own booklets. Like, thick
so it was
booklets.
Like before that. Yeah. And then kind of getting a little older, like kind of basically stealing music before there was
like
Napster.
LimeWire and
before all that
FrostWire.
stuff existed, like FTP sites and trading and burning CDs and selling CDs and all these like scammy little high school.
I would call it the dark web, but it was the internet back then.
It was like
that's what it was.
Nobody else was on. There was no light web. There was just like that was the internet.
It's like people would go and buy CDs and burn them and put them on like these random FTP sites.
So I was like interested in that stuff, and then just kind of normal, like video games, skateboarding.
Did you know back then when the internet was just kind of on the rise that it would be what it's become today? Like, did you kind of have that vision that, eventually it would have these sorts of capabilities?
I don't think I had a sense of, like, I didn't have a future view of the world in any meaningful way. But I knew I was super into it, and it was like, I don't remember ever making a conscious decision like I'm going to focus my life on like leveraging this new technology.
Right.
But it was just like obvious to me that like I liked it, and it was kind of became a center point of my life. And from like learning HTML like really early to like then going to school and focusing on engineering and stuff like that.
So you did go to school?
Yeah, so I went from Las Vegas to Miami, like very chill spots.
Just from party town to another party town. Yeah.
So I went to University of Miami in Florida, and focused on engineering there.
And you graduated?
No. So I have like the weirdest non-graduation because it's such a like founder stereotype of like, oh no, I like blew out of there and whatever. I went all 4 years. And in fact, you need 120 credits to graduate. I think I have like over 140 credits, but they don't add up to a degree.
They're not the requirements for the degree.
No,
they were just classes that you wanted to take.
I just took all the classes I wanted to take.
I love that you bring that up because I feel like that's how college should be. But yes.
So like I don't have a degree.
Yeah.
I have like a high GPA, like probably like a 3.8 or something.
Yeah.
With like way more credit, like almost a year and a half more credits than you need to graduate. But like I don't have a degree.
Like you didn't take all the engineering courses.
No, I didn't take. Yeah, there was like
So what did you take? Like what were like the majority of your classes? Like what were you interested in? Just different random stuff?
All sorts of stuff. Yeah. So I like political science and finance and English literature and like kind of a,
like his own GE program.
Yeah. So it was like this whole, I had, and the whole reason I didn't finish with engineering or computer science was like they had COBOL was a required language. And I was like, this is so dumb. Nobody writes in this language. It's crap. So I just was like, I don't care. I'm not going to do it.
So you never wanted to like complete that degree?
I never got the degree. So I don't have, like I have, it's.
Were you worried at all? Like I'm spending all this money. I'm like spending all this time. Like, or were you kind of just like, you know what? Like I'll figure it out. Like I don't really need to have the degree. Like,
I think I was like not, I was like conscious of it, but all like more of a just like, you go to college to learn.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to learn the things I think are valuable to me and that I want. And like, I'm going to get out of it. And like, I don't actually care that much, but it was like, and it was kind of just a like, I don't know, like a moral thing of like, I think your requirements are stupid.
Yeah.
So I'm just not going to do them. Like,
just that rebellious.
So I always had like a, I don't know, punk attitude.
Especially for some majors, like they have so many requirements where it's like you barely have any room outside of those requirements to take just like elective like classes that you're interested in, where it kind of makes it dumb where it's like you're so like you have a lot of knowledge, I guess, or foundational knowledge in like one thing, but there's so many other like interesting classes that you would have to stay an extra year and spend so much more money on just to like take those classes in college.
Yeah, like I took a public speaking class.
Yeah.
And that actually has benefited me enormously throughout my career, where like this one like legacy computer programming language like would have done nothing.
Yeah.
So
around what like time was this? Like what year was this when you were
I finished college in 2000.
Okay.
So it was a really interesting time because it was like kind of.
So was that a time when it was at a time when like college was, at least that degree was a lot more like praised, I guess, than it
there was no like, oh, founders leave school, like it's a cool thing to do. That like did not exist, you know?
Or that like you don't need a bachelor's degree to go into this field. Like you probably needed it.
Yeah, it was definitely still a thing. And especially to like go all 4 years and rack up all the loans and everything that come with it to like not do it. It was like, I don't know, like it's pretty funny.
Were you working during college?
I worked all through college. Usually I had like two main jobs. I was a work study and I worked in the finance department. And then I worked at Blockbuster Music.
Wow, great.
Which was pretty funny.
I miss Blockbuster so much.
Yeah. They had, for, in Miami, I don't know if they were nationwide or what, but they had a seed, like a record store, like chain for a little while. And then my senior year, I like went through all the interview process to like get hired for post-graduation, and I took a job with a firm and they let me start, and I worked my senior year at my real job that I was going to have after graduation.
Right.
What was that?
It was with a consulting firm that was like, back then everything was like e-business, and like all these businesses were kind of transforming from the old way of doing things to going online. So they were like a consulting firm,
Right.
That's now been acquired a bunch of times and is still around actually. But I was a consultant,
Nice.
like for my senior year, and then
Like
my
a
first year.
business consultant.
Yeah.
So it didn't have to do with like coding or.
Well, so like they would do like our first client, the client I was only on one client, was a big insurance company, and we went in and like analyzed their business process, but then like that's when I would come in is to like build the tools.
I see.
So it was like still like
to go like online. Like
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it was like an insurance company, and it was like the first time insurance was online.
Mm-hmm.
It was what we built. So it was like pretty cool.
Out of curiosity, what do you think about? This has nothing to do with you, I guess, but I mean, it kind of does. What do you think about the consulting industry? I mean, sometimes I just think to myself, it's like complete bullshit where they go in and they tell you exactly what you already know, and they kind of tell you how to fix it. But I'm curious, what were your thoughts back then, and what are your thoughts now on like consulting or even just management consulting or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, I was 22 and just coming out of school, so I was like, "This is awesome.
This is awesome." Yeah,
yeah, and like.
The pay is good.
Pay is good, and it was like the idea of like, I'm gonna go into all these clients and learn all these different businesses was really attractive. As a like person who gets pitched by consultants, like I don't generally see a lot of value there.
Right. Do you think that that's an industry that will be disrupted?
I guess. I mean, you have this kind of freelance culture now where everyone is kind of. There's such a huge world of people who are kind of like either they partner up with other skill sets, so you'll have like a
design consultant,
who partners with an SEO person, who partners with a copyright person, who, and they all kind of have their little network, but they also all go do their own things.
Right.
I think that is like gonna increase.
Right.
But yeah, I have no real concept of the like McKinsey world or like that. The like
right.
I mean,
the hardcore consultants.
They must still be providing value in some way, but I think that like naturally, like the more data becomes available, like at some point the proprietors of the business should be able to like make those judgments.
Right.
It's like you're just hiring someone to come tell you how to run your business. Like, what are you doing at that point? Like, it's like, but so you're 22 years old. You're doing consulting. Like, did you see yourself staying there for a while, or did you know that was kind of just going to be like a temporary type of thing? How long were you there?
I still definitely was like, so in my mind, I was like, all right, by the time I'm 25, I'm going to be like doing something big. I want to start something, whatever.
For yourself.
Yeah. And I was like, I'll learn consulting and then like kind of use this. But it was 2000. So it was like, I think I was on the job for like 6 months. And then they moved me from Miami to Los Angeles. And then, there was like 8 of us in LA in a small office they were opening. The boss shows up one day and is like, hey, we're shutting this office down. And like, we all were just laid off. So it was like, and that was kind of like, web10.com apocalypse. So that was like, it was actually really hard because it was like literally for a year, maybe more than a year after that, like, I would send my resume out all day, every day. I didn't have a job. And I couldn't even no one would even respond that like, hey, I got your resume.
Wow.
We'll keep you on file. It was just like, so it was pretty dark. I felt like my life had already peaked. Like my 6 months of work was like.
And you're 22.
And I was 22. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, I missed it. Like that whole .com, the internet, I was like, in college the whole time watching it grow. Then I finally get out and it blows up and it's over.
And did it feel like I mean, to you and the people around you, like, did it feel like it was actually over? Or
it felt like it was done.
Really?
Yeah.
And like this thing that was like so exciting and so much promise just completely done.
And it was like, there was 9/11 and there's all these, the whole world felt weird. But it felt like it was done. And just like, it felt both like you missed the party and it wasn't what you'd hoped it was going to be.
Did you like regret like kind of going down the computer science path at that point?
I regretted staying in school. I was like, there was a dude I worked with who was like 4 years older than me, maybe. And he had gotten out 4 years before. So he like made money through that whole cycle. And he had bought a house, he bought a Porsche, he had all this stuff, and I'm like, wow. I was like, I'm on unemployment, I'm like not paying rent, I can't get a response on a job. So I was like, damn, I wasted these 4 years in school and missed the window.
Super depressing.
So I was like, I thought I had peaked and just missed it.
So what did you do in that year?
Literally nothing. Like basically nothing. Like I just applied for jobs and like.
What were you applying for? Like computer science jobs or
I mean,
like
anything. Like all the way from like every engineering job that I could like find. And the truth was I was actually a really terrible engineer. So I go into an interview and get like smoked and just like it was. And then I was applying for jobs at like GameStop and like where and like
you're overqualified.
Yeah, so it's like and they're like no. I got a job after like a year doing tech support for a software company that was selling software to auto body shops.
Wow, really niche.
Who still need software to this day.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't know. I think I was making like $75,000 out of college, which was a lot back then. To like, $12 an hour. And I was like, I really felt like I had just like missed it, peaked, and it was over.
How long did you do that?
Maybe like 6 months, and then and it was really terrible. Like I hated it. I was on a plane. And I met a guy who had been a school psychologist. And I didn't even know that was really a job. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And he was an older guy. He was telling me he was retiring. And this is like, again, like 2002. He's telling me he's retiring because there was this new law, NCLB, and he was spending all his time doing paperwork to report to the state and federal government about the kids instead of helping the kids. And so I was curious and I was asking him a lot of questions about it. And having this background as a consultant and an engineer, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I can't believe there's not software for that. So I got his number and we stayed in touch and we went back and forth, and he was up in Santa Barbara and I was here. I drove up there a few times and like interviewed him some more. And it turned out there was like, this federally mandated law had just gone online and just like passed and gone live. And all these schools, and this is, early 2000s. So businesses in general weren't very sophisticated and schools especially weren't. So I basically built software to manage that process. So I like started my first company, my first like legit.
Like, did you talk to other psychologists and see like, oh, like this is a recurring, like there's a problem for all these people?
I talked to a few, and I was just doing a lot of research.
Yeah.
And
like it was a big enough thing where you're like, I should start this, or was it just like, well, you're curious and you're like, I'll just.
I was curious, and like, I mean, it was a very random thing. I was like 22. I like didn't have kids, could care less about education. It was just like, oh wow, here's a problem. There's a law. If schools are out of compliance, it's like there's big financial issue. It's a big financial problem. So I just built the software to try to solve that.
And you built that yourself?
I built it myself. And the dude I mentioned who was like a few years older than me, he was actually my boss who had the Porsche in the house. I convinced him to come help me. So it was really the two of us, and then we partnered with that school psychologist, and then we hired one other guy who is like a sales guy, and we went and tried to sell this product to schools.
Was it successful?
We got it into 80% of the schools in the U.S.
Really?
Yeah.
How long did that take?
It took like 4 years.
Wow. And I'm assuming the software still exists today, or?
It's been acquired by a public company, but so it was a really weird thing. What happened, the very, very first school district we got introduced to was San Francisco Unified. So I go up there, pitch them, and they're like, oh, this is awesome. We're in. We'll buy it. And they like bought it on the spot. So I was like...
And did you have this whole like subscription model laid out? And like, okay. So you had that.
So San Francisco buys it, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be like wildfire. Like, like we're just going to go cross country, line them up, knock them down. The next like 18 months didn't close a single school district.
Oh, geez.
I went to like every conference, every random event.
Yeah.
Like spent the whole year driving around, flying around, and literally did not close a single school district. We're about to like shut the company down. And I was at one of those events and I met a guy who was, his company did what was called student information systems. So student information system is the like, manages the whole school. It's like the grades, the lunches, the buses, everything. And he was like, oh, dude, why are you going school district to school district? That's stupid. He's like, we go sell the whole state. We have like lobbyists. We go sell the whole state. And when it's as hard to sell a state as it is a school district. If you sell a state, you get all of them.
Yeah.
So we did a deal with his company where we were the like white label little special education component, and then they were selling it state by state by state.
They would integrate it into their SIS?
Yeah. Okay. So we were just like used our little. We had a little API we built. They built it into their thing. And there was like 3 or 4 companies who did that, who were like the student information system. We got all of them to use our system.
Talk about a growth hack.
Yeah. And we just like instantly had like the whole country. And there were 4 of us employees. We never raised money. And we were just getting like a very small amount, like a nickel per student.
But a lot.
For the US. So it's like, ends up being a lot.
Per month?
It was like, I can't remember the exact economics. I mean, it was like a couple $1 million a year business.
Nice.
But if you're like...
And then how long did you run that?
So it was interesting. Once we did those deals, basically the deal was like, we were like actually prohibited in our deal from adding new features.
Really?
Because they were like, we train the schools. We don't want to have to go retrain anybody.
Got it.
So it became just a like customer support thing.
Yeah.
So we all went and did different jobs. So I went and like founded a different company.
This thing was like running itself.
It was just running.
Yeah.
For a long time. I sold my shares to help fund Klout though. So I was involved for, I don't know, 6 years.
So it was still like its own private, it was like a bit private business at that time? So
never got bought until more recently.
Okay.
But it ran for like a long time as just like, I don't know, the provider to all these student information systems.
Joe, I'm curious, how did you in those 18 months survive? Like what was your mentality? You know, were you thinking like, damn, like it's been 18 months, like nothing's really coming out of this. Like, should we keep doing this? Like, why didn't you give up in month 6? Why didn't you give up in month 12?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, still the economy was really bad. So it wasn't like there was a lot of other interesting things.
Yeah.
And I just didn't really know. I didn't know that, there wasn't the internet then. I think about this a lot. Like the fact that there wasn't Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Medium Post, like I didn't know I was behind.
Right.
And I wasn't jealous of what other people were doing.
Right.
And so I was just like, I felt like I was just hustling, and I was like, I'd fill stuff in. I would do little like random contract things in between just to like make rent or whatever.
There was no issue of like, this isn't good enough.
Yeah, I didn't feel like, oh wow, I'm not tracking.
Right.
Because there just was like the information was, compared to my friends, I was actually doing really great.
Right. Yeah, because right now I feel like everybody who's like about to hit 30 is like, we are so unsuccessful if we haven't started a company, if we haven't sold a company, because you're always comparing yourself to like that one person that you see who's like pretend selling his company to like a pretend company.
Yeah.
And like all the fake bullshit that's happening on social media.
Yeah, like who's, like, oh, I haven't spoke at a conference, or I haven't haven't had any press, or like,
yeah, I'm not a motivational speaker yet.
Yeah, I don't have this many followers. Yeah. Like just none of that existed.
Right.
So it was like actually way easier to be like just doing your thing.
Right.
And I feel like this is a great segue into Klout, which you started after
the opposite,
this.
but like created the
to be able to monitor this stuff. Tell us like how that even came about. Like I love the name, obviously, and it's still something that's stood the test of time. But how did the idea for Klout come about, and what was that transition like?
Yeah, so Klout was kind of a crazy thing. So after the school thing, I moved to New York from Los Angeles. I got involved with a company there that was doing things in the data space, but really around real estate data. So like aggregating all data that was interesting in a real estate transaction. I was running basically like product and engineering there, kind of a late co-founder. So I was like looking at a lot of data and thinking about data a lot. Late 2007, I had jaw surgery. So my jaw was wired shut for like 3 months. I have like, I don't know, 12 screws and a bunch of plates, and like they took like an inch of bone out of my jaw.
Did you have like an accident, or it was
no?
just
It's like so lame. Nothing cool even happened. It's just like my jaw was like not aligned, and they had told me when I was like 17 I was gonna need this surgery.
Otherwise, like your teeth would get all messed up.
It was just like I had really bad headaches and a bunch of stuff. So I finally got it fixed. So late 2007, early 2008, I'm like wired shut, stuck in my apartment in New York, and I'm really reliant on Twitter and Facebook just to like communicate. And I'd been using those casually and even as part of my job and looking at all these data sets. But once I was completely reliant on them, it changed how I thought about those platforms, that it was like crazy to me that the people who trusted me the most, I could share my opinion with them on anything. And for the first time that word of mouth was measurable and it was scalable. And, I had this background of engineering and data. So I built a really crappy prototype of Klout. And it was the name, I have the notebook page. The first thing at the top of the notebook is Klout with a K. And it's like a sketch of what it was.
Yeah. And for context, this was like pretty early Twitter days.
Yeah. So it was like, 2008.
Facebook was like four years old ish.
Yeah. So like, I remember at the time, Facebook, not too long before that, had just opened up public. It had been just for like college kids before that. And Twitter was just taking off. And I remember it was like this race between Ashton Kutcher and CNN to see who was going to get to 1 million followers first. And it was this big thing. So Twitter was still small.
Yeah.
And so my jaw's wired shut. I build this thing. A few months later, I get unwired and I go to show some friends. I'm like, hey, I built this thing. What do you think? And everyone's like, this is the dumbest thing. Like,
and so what was it? Like, tell us.
So yeah, it was a 1 to 100 score that looked at that point, only Twitter to measure how influential you were. Mm-hmm. So I would look, you had this like really crude algorithm on basically, like when you created content, did people care?
Yeah, and I'm guessing like it was a lot easier to like the API was like just open, and like it was a lot easier to scrape data at the time.
Yes and no. The API was open, but it was super unreliable. It was like hard to actually pull the data because it was
But also, didn't it require you to log into your Twitter account, which gave you access to it?
You could log in to Klout with your Twitter. Twitter was really open. Like we were pulling data on everybody, but you could add your Twitter account to your Klout score and different stuff to like. We would get more data about you.
Right.
It kind of just took off. Like, so my friends thought it was stupid. I couldn't convince. I was like, I'm doing this. I think it's a big deal. So the thesis then was like, all forms of broadcast media had been measured. TV's measured, radio's measured, newspapers measured. I really strongly believed that social media was going to explode and every person was going to have the ability to be a broadcaster. And if you could measure that it would be important. So you'd asked earlier of like the internet had an impact on like what I thought of the future. At that point, I didn't think that far ahead, but with Klout and social media, I was like, okay, like the world is going to change here.
And this was before anyone was like really monetizing off of Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, nobody was an influencer.
No.
Nothing was, it was just like, it was super, super, super early days. Like, the first time I went to Twitter's office to meet with them, to show them what I had built, there was like 11 people working there.
Wow.
So I was like, you just walked in.
I feel like I can name them all. Like,
yeah, I mean, you can.
Yeah.
Back when they still didn't have the dislike button.
Yeah, exactly. Still. So that was the thesis. I tried getting some friends to quit their jobs to join me. Everyone was like, this is dumb.
How are you going to monetize this thing? Did you have an idea?
I just had a belief that it would be valuable. Like,
okay. And if there was value, it would equate to some sort of money.
Yeah, like eventually that would
whether it's a subscription, whether it's an acquisition, something.
Yep. I remember when I was making the decision of like quitting my job, I had this conversation with my then girlfriend, now wife. I said like, if everything goes right, I think we could grow this company to like 5 or so people and Twitter will maybe acquire it for a couple $1 million. Like that was like the horizon.
That was the peak. Yeah.
That was like
the ideal situation.
Yeah. Everything went right. This would be amazing. This could happen. And I was like, and if it doesn't work, I will be doing something interesting in this space, and I bet I could get a job at Twitter.
Right.
And I was like, so
either way, I'm going to end up at Twitter.
Yeah, I was like, this will be cool.
Either as like a C-suite or just doing something.
Yeah.
Did you just wondering like did you feel at that time when you quit your job that you were financially secure enough to build this thing that you really didn't know was going to make you money or not?
I had saved up. I think I had like $10,000 saved up, which felt like $10 million, but like it's not that much.
And this is like, how old are you around this time?
Like 28, 29.
Yeah. So it's right around the time, like I'm sure your friends are getting married. And
people are getting married. I'm living in New York. It's not cheap.
Yeah, it's not.
So like that money could go really fast.
Hopefully your girlfriend was working too.
She was working, so that helped. Yeah. And like we were, serious enough that it was a conversation.
And I'm assuming she was supportive of you like quitting your job and like taking on this risk.
Yeah, I mean, she was
after
cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
She'll say now that she probably did not think it was gonna end up.
Yeah. But I had a few $1,000. But I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I just need to make it a few months and then I'll get funding.
Right.
And I had never met an investor. I didn't even know what. By that point, the internet was big enough that I knew investors were a thing, and I was reading about it a lot. But I didn't know actually what it took to get funded. So I couldn't convince any friends to come join me. I had one friend in New York who married he was a New Yorker. He married a Singaporean woman and moved to Singapore, and he opened an offshore dev shop in Singapore. I did a deal with him for equity where I got some of his engineers, and then I went and offshored myself. I stayed in Singapore for like 8 months to build.
Why did you need all these engineers though? Like, hadn't you built like kind of was it kind of like just a framework and like it was built off like?
It was so bad. Yeah. Really? It was like basically what I built was like, it was embarrassingly bad. Yeah. Like somebody would
like back end, front end, both the whole thing.
I built the whole you could. So if you went to the first version of Klout and registered, it was like a really super basic web page. It would send an email to me with your like information. I would then like go in the system and manually pull your data from Twitter and then copy and paste it into Excel to run the Klout.
Not very sustainable.
And then I would
give you a score.
And then I would like manually go in and update your web page, your Klout score page. And then I would manually email you back and be like, hey dude, your score's ready.
Yeah.
And
no automation.
Yeah, no automation, but it was like the bones were a little bit there.
Yeah.
It was like a proof of concept. It was really like duct tape.
Yeah. So how long did it take? 8 months to build it?
Well, yeah. So that was like my version that I did while my jaw was wired shut. I went over there and we made it like a legit-ish thing. Right. And over the course of 8 months. And it was like it was like 2 trips of 4 months, basically.
So you had said that you were going to ideally raise money at one point. Did you end up raising that money, and what was that process like?
So I'm sitting in Singapore, and all of a sudden it's September of 2008.
So about exactly 11 years ago.
But it's like Lehman Brothers. Yeah. Like 2008, 2009 was like world financial, shitstorm, apocalypse. So like I'm sitting there and I'm just like, oh crap. Like I quit my job.
And were you making money at this time? Or
no,
nothing?
Not at all. Yeah. So I remember sitting in the office in Singapore for 2 days just staring at the ceiling because I had quit my job and I was like, there's no way they're going to raise any money. Like the world financial system.
And that was your path to profit, like making something. Like
the goal was to like build something to go pitch it to try to raise money.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, there's no money to be raised. There's no jobs to be had. And
you're shit out of luck.
Yeah, like I'm screwed. So yeah, I was like paralyzed with like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
And finally got over it. I was like, well, all I could do is like finish building this thing and try to make it work. So actually, it took 2 years from them. I didn't get the first funding till like 2010.
Wow.
So it was just like 2 years of like,
which is still like, I feel like that's like when Instagram like was just like launching, right?
still probably a year and a half or two before
Yeah, it's like
Instagram.
2011,
So it was
I
like
think.
Foursquare was
2011.
starting to come up. Tumblr was starting to come. I mean, I was in New York, so I would see those guys. Foursquare was 2 people. Tumblr was 2 people. Like they
was
were
that wave.
small companies. But that was like, that was when that was all happening.
But in those 2 years, you had users.
Yeah, so like it kind of took off, and it like,
Was there like a moment that sparked that takeoff?
I think it was just like this. There was a bigger wave that we were riding. Just like social media was becoming a thing, and it was like it had transformed from like, MySpace, which was like a kid's thing, to like, Twitter, and like, is this people are putting a lot of effort into it? It doesn't matter for your job, and like having the score and the name, the Klout name, really resonated, and so it was like the combination of like I'd done a lot of stuff that was like right product, wrong time, and many more things that were wrong product anytime. This was like right product, right time, and just like. And it had this ego crack component where you went in, you put your name in, and it was like, oh, you're a 57, and like people would tweet out like my Klout score is 57, and then everyone would be like, well, what's my score? And like, it just had this like.
I remember like he had done it, I think, one time, and I was like, what is this? And then I did it, and it's like,
and I found out about it in 2011, and the person that told me about it actually was a guest of ours, Alex Benayan, and we were sitting at USC, and like we were in student government. And I overheard him talking about it, and I'm like, let me check this thing out. And then I asked him like what it was, and that's how he told me. And like back then, like, I mean, I've been using Twitter for years, so I was like always on Twitter and then Instagram and Facebook. And I remember at one point, like, you could get all 3 scores. Like, combined.
So we added all that stuff together. I think we had like 30 or 40 social networks at one point.
I was definitely like my key like influence was like USC, USC Trojans, USC football, UCLA football, which I always shat on.
Yeah.
So it was always those. Like, you could tell really that I was a heavy USC influencer.
So awesome.
So not much has changed. But yeah, I found out about it in 2011. So I've been following.
That
it
was
for
like
years.
2011, 2012 were really just like peak Klout years.
And in those like couple of years, what were you doing to make money? Like, were you just fully working on this thing? And
Well, did you get funded or?
Oh yeah, we raised a bunch of money after that.
Okay.
So it was like, I think in total we raised like 40 some million.
Wow. What was that experience like? Because I know you said you had never done it.
It was crazy. Yeah, like when I started Klout, I literally had never met a single person who even worked at Google, like a janitor at Google, or not. Like, I felt still very distant from like the Silicon Valley scene. So the first round of funding for Klout was $1.5 million. I think I pitched like 200 people, and it was 37 angel investors.
Oh my God.
So it was like super long tail, small checks. But then my next round was led by Kleiner Perkins, who was like, one of the biggest, most important firms. And like,
how long was it until you got that round?
It was like a year after, and that round took like, so it took like a year to raise the $1.5 million, and it took like 2 months to raise the next 10, and then it took like 2 weeks to raise the next 30. Like it gets, just the momentum. Like, the momentum on the company was just like,
you're doing something right.
Yeah,
like you were hitting your milestones and all those things.
We were like blowing, like.
Was it mainly like just like user like stuff, or like growing user base and that kind of stuff, or was it more than that? Was it like, were you making money like as a company?
Yeah, we were like, I mean, every metric was hockey sticking.
Yeah,
it was like user growth was hockey sticking, revenue was hockey sticking.
Where was the revenue coming from, if you don't mind me asking? So
we had 2 main sources of revenue. We had brands who were paying us for access to the influencers.
Got it.
So we worked with like.
You're like an OG influencer marketing agency.
But it was really different because we didn't give the brands the influencers. So like if we, let's say, who's a big customer? Like Nike's a big customer. So Nike wants the 500 people most influential about running. We analyzed all the content you created to say like, okay, these are the people, whether it was by geography or whatever. Nike sent us the stuff, like the sneakers, and then we sent it to the user. So we never sold the list. We never sold the data.
Wow.
We owned that relationship.
How did
and we never paid. We never paid the influencer, and we never told them what they had. Our rule was like the influencer could say whatever they want.
But so Nike paid you guys.
Yeah.
And then sent you product.
And you would just give free product to influencers, or would you also you wouldn't pay them?
That was the business. Like, how crazy is that?
I mean, this is genius.
Brands paid us to give their products away for free to people who are good at the internet.
Because you guys were like,
crazy.
I mean, you guys, I'm trying to think, like, broker might be the wrong word, but like
liaison.
Yeah, like you were like the, I guess,
you're like the
escrow
representative.
company. You were like the escrow company, like that was like kind of like getting paid plus here's the product. We're going to ship it off. Like, and they had that trust in you, obviously.
Yeah. And it was really different from what the influencer scene looks like now, because we actually purposely didn't care about the high end. We didn't care about the Kim Kardashians or whatever.
Right.
We were like, we call, what it now is micro influencer, but we were calling like everyday influencer, the person who amongst their friends was like the leader.
The nano influencer.
But if they didn't if they didn't have access to those people and to even know who they were, right? Like, how did they trust you that like you were giving them the right
and not
data?
like selling it?
Yeah, or like keeping the product or something.
Well, we were able to show. So we had like the Twitter file. We were analyzing something ridiculous, like billions of pieces of data a day.
Yeah.
And we were able to then report to them, like, here's all the content that was created, and here's how many people it reached, and here's all these
So
stats.
they were able to see like what was their like ROI metric? Like,
so we would show them like a bunch. Some of it was conversion rate, some of it was like effective CPMs. There was a bunch of metrics, but like we had multiple. I mean, we were doing more than $10 million on that business. So it was like, McDonald's was a customer, Audi was a customer. Nike,
they were paying
Disney,
you for the
Starbucks.
service. Like, I mean, you were like, would it be considered SaaS? Like, was it considered a SaaS company?
We had some that were on like monthly
subscription
things, and then there's a campaign version, and then there was a SaaS version.
And then how would you contact these influencers? Like, just DM them and be like,
no, because they all
product for you.
They
their emails.
They had all registered for Klout to monitor their Klout scores. So they were signing in the Klout every day to check their scores. So if you were an influencer on Klout, or even if you weren't, you didn't even have to be that influential. It was just like geography versus topic. You would sign in and it would be like, these 5 brands have offers for you, and you picked what you wanted.
Oh. For the record, I never got any FUCLA gear. I would have really appreciated that, but it's not.
Apologies for not making that.
I know, it's okay. What was the second form of revenue?
So the second revenue was data. So we had... we were doing multiple billions of API calls a day where brands or more companies were paying us for access to the data. So an example would be like basically so here's a crazy one. We had hotels in Las Vegas where we plugged our data into their reservation system. So if you were checking into, let's say, the Palms, they'd be like, oh, we're going to upgrade your room.
Because they knew you were like had a lot of followers.
Yeah, because they wanted you on social media to be like, the Palms is sick. I love it, blah, blah, blah. Or we had like almost all the call center software providers where maybe you're not the person who should be sitting on hold for an hour.
I was waiting to see how the Vegas connection came into play.
So
if you were like an influencer, you wouldn't be placed on hold.
Yeah, you'd get a manager.
By Verizon or something.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers.
We also... Microsoft was paying us a ton of money, and they were using the data in Bing for search.
Yeah.
So, and Microsoft was an investor in us. So the business was like 50-50 on the like campaign side and the data side.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, this business is genius. Like, I loved it from when I first saw it. I was like, this is gonna be awesome. I know Pat was hooked on it pretty instantly as well. Did you enjoy running that company? Like, were you like, when you were running it, like, was it something that you were proud of and like loved doing day in and day out?
It was super intense. It was super, super, super intense. It was like, I mean, it's a company that like started in my bedroom. That was just like, oh, my jaw's wired shut. I'm on a lot of drugs. Here's a fun thing to make.
Yeah.
To like,
moral of the story is do drugs.
I always thought my investors would like re-break my jaw when we were like didn't hit our numbers to like try to get me to have better ideas. The biggest company I had worked at prior to that was like 10 people, and we were like 80, 90, 100 people.
And were you like the CEO?
I was the CEO through the whole thing. Yeah. We raised over $40 million. So like the intensity and the pressure, and like we were so much in the press. It was just like, there's a Klout for Dummies book. There's an episode of Workaholics all about Klout. I mean, I would have like celebrities writing in, coming to the office, calling because they were pissed about their Klout scores. Like, we had a PR firm whose whole job was to kill press because there was so much press about us.
Yeah,
it was just like felt like being in the middle of like a hurricane for like many years.
Who had the highest Klout?
So that was like also always the biggest thing. People would get so pissed because Justin Bieber had the highest Klout.
I remember that.
Every article was like, Klout, the stupid company who thinks Justin Bieber has the most Klout. But it was like, that was the data.
Yeah, I mean,
like if you're, in 2012, Justin Bieber was a bigger deal around the world than Barack Obama. Right. And like, if you talk to the people who worked at Twitter, like a ridiculous amount of their servers were dedicated to Justin Bieber. It would be like being mad at Nielsen because The Bachelor is like the most popular TV show instead of 60 Minutes.
I mean, if you guys were around in 2016, I guarantee you Donald Trump's campaign would have paid a fat paycheck to get that.
It's sad because Klout is needed now more than ever with all the like disinformation. And
I was about to say, like, is anybody else doing this now?
The world has just changed so much.
But what happened to Klout?
Oh, so in 2014 we sold.
Okay.
So we were acquired by a company called Lithium, who was a big SaaS enterprise marketing company for like $200 million.
Yeah, it was very sad. I went on Klout.com one day. They're like, Klout is now like Cloud or something, or Klout.
Kaput. It was so dumb.
Kaput. Yeah, I was like,
but
are you fucking kidding me?
That's like it was weird. I mean, they bought it. They could do what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you'd ask this question, did I enjoy Klout? It was super intense. If you'd asked me even a month before that acquisition what I would be doing in 20 years, I would have said running Klout. Like, it was crazy, but it was fucking awesome. And it was like, we had an amazing team. We were, because of that kind of tornado we were in, we called ourselves Klout Laws. And we were like, really had this kind of like, we know what we're building. We don't care what the rest of the world says. We're like in it. So it was fun. It was like a intense experience.
During those years, I'm assuming you got married or
got married. Yeah, got married. It was a lot of stuff. Like a lot of growing up and a lot of I mean, just like growing up is learning how to be a CEO and learning how to
lead people. And,
yeah.
So, did you take any time off between that acquisition and like Joymode? I mean, obviously you also built now another big company. It's been 5 years since that acquisition.
And what made you, like, you just sold like a company for a good amount of money. Like, what made you even want to start another business versus just like, I don't know, retire or do something else? I don't know. Chill.
Yeah, good question. So my last day at Klout was like April 4th or something. 2015, because I stayed a year after the acquisition. My first delivery for Joymode was like May 15th of the same year. So it's like...
So you must have been working on it. Well,
it's like thinking about it, and it was like really low tech first delivery. So I really did not take any time. And I think in retrospect, that was like a mistake. That conversation with my wife of like, I had this other idea I want to start working on, and she's just like, I'm going to stab you. Like, what the hell? Like, we just went through this whole thing. Like, can't we chill for a minute? But I was like, still. So the funny thing is, I'd had the idea for Joymode actually before Klout, and had tried working on Joymode before Klout and couldn't. I'd said like, right product, wrong time. Like that was one of them. And I was still just really hungry. I was like, selling Klout was 100% the right thing to do at the moment, but I wasn't ready to be done. And
I mean, you are still young.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to just retire for the next 40 years of your life and do nothing.
Well, I felt like if I stopped, I would get soft.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm in that mode right now. Now it's starting to catch up to me where it's like, wow, I've been operating at this like level. High intensity for like 12 years. And it's like, it's starting to wear down.
But now you at that moment, you like kind of going off what Pat said, you have that financial security and you could technically like just chill or take it easy a little bit.
Yeah.
But you didn't. Like, obviously you're like, let's get back right into it. What was it that you started? Like, what was the idea of Joymode? Like, what is that initial premise?
So when I moved in 2005 from Los Angeles to New York, I met a girl who's now my wife and been through this whole story.
Yeah.
We moved into an apartment in New York together. And that apartment was so small that basically anytime either of us bought something, we had to get rid of something just to like function in that space.
Was that like a rule that was discussed, or that was just like what happened?
It was like what was just kind of naturally happening, and then we just kind of made it a rule where like it just kind of like informally became a thing where we were like, we'd be out and we'd be like, oh, we should get that. And we'd be like, well, where would we put it? What would we get rid of?
Yeah.
It's like what Snapchat was trying to do until like now they've added, like every time they added a new feature, they would take
like on their app. Yeah. But then there's like physical clutter.
Yeah. So we were like, so it was like physical stuff. And on one side, I really liked it. I was like, oh, it's nice living in a space where we're like unencumbered from just clutter and all the kind of mental tax of that. On the other side, I was like, this is really annoying. I feel like our life is like artificially kind of, I don't know, just like artificially, like we're blocked from doing things like just because we don't have space. And so I got really fascinated with like, well, why do we have to own stuff? And what if you didn't have to own stuff, and tried coming up with all these different mechanisms. But this is like too early. It was like there was no Airbnb.
Like,
there was no.
Oh, okay. So this is like
2005, 2006.
Yeah.
There's no even apps. There's no like the iPhone is just like a year or
like
so.
How would this even work?
Yeah. Like so,
I
it's
think
like
the iPhone wasn't even out.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah.
So there's like
07.
so I was spending all this time trying to come up with ways to do it, and they were like all these dumb ways, and I couldn't get that like sharing economy breakthrough. And then I had the idea for Klout, and I was like, oh, this works. I'll focus on this. But in the background of Klout, I was, if I had spare cycles, I would think about this idea. And like, the world I felt like was changing, where like people were getting less and less attached to the things they owned. And it wasn't the goal as much anymore to like move to the suburbs to fill your house with stuff, to like, show some form of status. It was about the experiences you were having. So it just felt like this like cultural shift was happening. So what Joymode is, it's basically access to all the products you don't need to own. So it's a subscription service. And if you were like going camping, we'll bring you the fully curated camping bundle. So it'd be like the tent, the cooler, the chairs, the stove, like everything, and then we pick it up when you're done. And you have access. You could do a one-off, or you could pay a membership and have unlimited access to everything. So it's basically, like almost Netflix for stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the old version of Netflix.
And I'm really fascinated, not just by Joymode, but this entire space, like the sharing economy, and like you mentioned, like Uber, companies like Uber and Airbnb and companies like that, obviously popping up and doing so well. Like I really would like love to talk about what you see the future of this space being, and how that's going to impact brands, businesses. Obviously, we know how it's going to impact like the end user, which is less things in your house, and potentially less money spent on shit that you don't need, where you just buy it and use it once and store it somewhere and never use it again, and now you have to try to resell it somehow and make less money back. And this whole model that we've had for so long. But like, what happens to all these brands? And obviously that's going to impact retail and that kind of stuff. Like, how do you see this playing out? Because I see it obviously becoming a huge thing.
Yeah. I always think about like, it wasn't that long ago where if I walked into somebody's house and I saw a CD or DVD collection, it was actually like cool.
Yeah.
It was like this interesting view into stuff you liked and like your taste. And I would go check it all out. Now, if you see that, you're like, why do you still have this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, don't you know about Spotify or Netflix? Like, this is weird. What we're trying to do with Joymode, and other people are attacking from all sorts of other angles, is like everything else. Like, you don't need to own these things. And obviously, you're still going to own some stuff, but if we could help you own fewer things that you care more about, that are higher quality, but be able to do more because you have access to everything else and you can use it just when you need it. It's just a better way of living, and this kind of consumption hangover of like debt and clutter and environmental impact. So it really is, I think, going to change how we all live and how we function in kind of our day-to-day lives. And for brands, it is, I think, somewhat scary from like, oh wow, maybe like retail is not what I
or selling direct to consumer. Like at some point, they're like, I would see them competing to see who's gonna be the top, experience on Joymode for this category, right? Like they're all competing right now for the end consumer, but in this case, they're gonna be competing.
They might actually make more money. And like, you look at record labels and studios on Spotify and Netflix in a royalty-based world.
Yeah.
Like, there was some painful transition years, but now are doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
And, so yeah, I think like economic models and interaction models and relationship models are all going to be changing. And it's, we're a part of that. There are many other companies doing amazing stuff.
And do you see it being like, I don't want to say limited because it's such a big, like the experience space is so big because everything's an experience. But do you see Joymode moving into like different products that maybe aren't related to experiences or just other things?
The funny thing is the third most popular product on all of Joymode is a vacuum cleaner.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like not even like a hardcore like industrial thing, like
a Dyson.
Like a Dyson. And we look at it as like anything you use less than weekly potentially could be on Joymode.
Yeah.
And it's about how we tell stories around those products and how we make them accessible to you, but it's not just like tents and stuff. Like cooking things are super popular on Joymode. Air mattresses, luggage, like there's lots of utility stuff already. And we, that's an area we continue to invest in and expand.
I'm curious, when you were launching Joymode, did you personally invest in this company, or was it something again where you had to go out and fundraise?
Both. So yeah, I personally invested, but we've raised like a little over $20 million. So
and it was easier this time around, I assume?
It's a lot easier.
And did you start it alone or did you have co-founders?
I have 2 co-founders, yeah. And then there's another guy who was like basically there since day one.
And who are your co-founders? Like how did you meet them?
So one worked with me at Klout, and another I tried to recruit to Klout for like 5 years. So like
maybe it'll work with Joymode, huh?
Yeah. So like every time we hired an engineer, I would like take him out to lunch and be like, "Oh, who was the smartest person you worked with at your previous company?" And like multiple people from Google told me this guy, Wayne, was like really amazing. So I finally met him. We became
also worked at Google?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I tried to recruit him out of Google to come to Klout, and I could never get him. He wanted to start his own company. So I actually invested in that company to stay close to him. And we stayed close, and like timing just kind of worked out. When Joymode was starting, he was ready. And so he's been a partner. Another guy from Klout has been amazing, Keith. And then there's a guy, Weston, who was, funny enough, was our first customer, was the very first person to make a reservation on Joymode, and became the first employee and has been here since minute one. And
that's awesome.
Is basically a co-founder.
So it's been like a little over 4 years, right?
Yeah.
You've been running Joymode and growing it. What's been like the biggest challenge since starting it? Was it getting even people aware of Joymode, or?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. And this is a really, this is ultimately a logistics business. So like Klout had lots of challenges, but like it was all digital. So, you just like, we could throw servers at it or whatever. And we served the whole world from, minute zero. And Klout got big in Japan and Brazil and all these random places. Joymode is the opposite, where it's like, we own the inventory. The inventory that's on Joymode, like we go buy. So we have millions of dollars of inventory. We have a warehouse. Everything gets delivered. We have 20, 30,000 products a week that leave the warehouse.
It's like the opposite of like the traditional, like now it's traditional, but the traditional sharing economy model where the companies don't own anything. Yeah,
we're like, we own everything. We we own the structure. So,
but you're not just LA based, are you?
We're LA based.
I meant, like, do you only ship in
we
LA?
We only serve LA.
Wow.
Yeah, so we only serve LA. So we have right now like 25 to 30,000 products a week leave our warehouse. So that's 25 to 30,000 opportunities for something to go wrong. Of like, a product's not clean, or it's missing pieces, or it's broken, or blah blah blah. So like,
which happens, I assume.
Of course, but like we really, really focus on not letting it happen, and like, like that's a challenge. Just like the logistic
and the upkeep of like the products.
Yeah, just the like LA is a giant sprawling city, and like I mean, we had a meeting like one of our bottlenecks is number of doors on the warehouse. And you can't just like, it's just very different than cloud. We'd be like, oh, just throw more servers at it. Like, it's there. It's a physical building with doors. And you're like, oh, that's why we can't get more orders out. Like,
right.
So like, it's just like a very different world for me and like a new set of problems, and which I love.
And
but
so
it's like a lot of challenges.
How do you see it scaling to other cities? Is that in the works, or
for sure? Yeah, I mean, we're. I think this is a company where you have to go slow to go fast later. So like, there's been a lot of these geographically constrained companies that overexpanded and then contracted. LA is so huge. There's like so much market here we haven't
10
even
million
tapped.
people.
Yeah. So we've taken our time really trying to nail LA. We want to expand from a position of strength.
Mm-hmm.
I don't wake up stressed that somebody's going to open up Joymode Chicago if we're not there tomorrow. So like, being really deliberate and like figuring out the model and how to scale it in LA so that we can go replicate that city to city.
But let's say there were to like be other competitors enter the market. How do you see, or what about Joymode is it that it would be like different than another company having a bunch of inventory and just trying to like sell experiences? Like besides the fact that obviously you've learned so much and figured out your own system that it would take like forever for them to figure out. But other than that, like,
that is like a big thing.
That's the big,
Like, I mean, we have 4 years of delivering thousands of products to know how to track all those things. We've built amazing systems. That core team that came out of Klout and Google and all these places, like we think about our data in a really different way than I think other people would approach this problem, and we believe that gives us a sustainable competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that our scale enable us to do where our economics are getting better and better, and we've had to raise already a lot of money, and it's a really complex set of challenges. And I know from pitching this company, it's really hard. Like, when I, even as somebody has a reasonable track record, try to pitch this company, a lot of investors have just a straight allergic reaction.
What's their allergic reaction to?
Well, you're like, oh, we're challenging the notion of ownership, and the investor's like, wow, that's a big idea. How are you doing that? Well, we own all the stuff, and it's like, car skids off the road. Like when you talk to an investor, a lot of times they are looking to pattern match, and so they're like, okay, let me think about that. What's beautiful about Uber, what's beautiful about Airbnb, what's beautiful about whoever is like, they don't own anything. Uber doesn't own cars. Airbnb doesn't own houses. They're middlemen. Now you're telling me you own everything. Like, that sounds like a bad idea. And so that, like that concept is hard to overcome.
Is this business possible without owning the product? And is that something that is in Joymode's long-term plans?
My bet is owning the product is required to get going. And over time, that can evolve.
Right.
But I think there's been a lot of attempts at this problem from a P2P perspective. And this idea that like you and I are going to coordinate so I could come get a mountain bike out of your garage.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're just playing kind of the middleman, like police, like making sure quality control.
Like, there's a little bit of it will work.
There's zero quality control in that.
Yeah, there's zero quality. Like, idea, we've got 500 tents in our warehouse.
Right.
But they're all the same tents. Like, we've done a ton of research to pick the right tent. We know how to service it. We've created great instructions. When we deliver it to you, it's going to work. And you being able to trust that is why you're a Joymode member. And so like all that stuff plays together, and I think, is required so people can have the type of experience they need to make that change, not own instead of access.
What's your personal favorite experience on Joymode?
I mean, I have kids, so like I use a lot. Kids is like a great, category for us because they're so transactional and what they want to play with. Like they
get sick of it really quickly.
Yeah, like I'll bring a ball pit home and it's the coolest thing in the world to them for a couple days. And then they're like, and then it's just like taking up our living room, and it's awesome that Joymode comes and picks it back up. So I bring stuff home almost every weekend. It's kind of like cool dad secret weapon.
Right.
So the kids stuff's really great. The cooking stuff is nice, where it's like, randomly we'll be like, oh, let's do a pizza night, and we'll take the pizza oven or a sous vide, or we've got like a lot of different cooking stuff, the air fryer, and not having that stuff take up my whole kitchen is like awesome.
Yeah. The way I found out about Joymode, actually, funny enough, was a few months ago. We had interviewed Dr. Jason Worsland, who's the founder of Theragun.
Oh yeah, and that's a huge product for us.
And so one of my good buddies DMs me. He's like, oh, I love that product. I'm like, oh, do you own one? He's like, oh, no, I've used it on Joymode. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, you've never heard of Joymode?
It's like the perfect product for Joymode. Yeah.
I was like, embarrassingly, I have not heard of Joymode.
Like a lot of these people, obviously, it's like $400 is a lot of money, and they want to use it usually like when they have some sort of injury, which is kind of like
hopefully not often.
Yeah, exactly.
Pat and I own one, and we love it, but it's like we don't really even have time to use it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, do we really?
It's an awesome product.
Yeah, it's a great product. Yeah.
If you're like, if it's like not in the budget, or it's like you're not hopefully injured a lot, like.
I think eventually you guys need to carry some. You guys have got to carry some like podcasting products for people that don't.
We've talked about it a lot. I think. I may need your help curating.
For sure.
So do you guys how does this work? Like, do you guys as a team get together like every now and then and just kind of brainstorm about new products to offer, new experiences, and like how do you go about choosing? Like, there's so many things out there, right? Like. Yeah.
So one of the cool things is because we just serve LA. Like we'll do deliveries. Like I'll go do deliveries, and you like
awesome.
You meet the customer, and it's like a really magical experience. But it's an avenue for us to get really direct feedback. So we hear a lot like, "Oh, I wish you guys." A woman was like, "I wish you guys had a dog obstacle course," and I was like, "That's kind of fun." Sure, and we just go and get it, and we try it, and we put it out there and see if it works. And if it does, we scale up. If it doesn't, we'll have a couple of them around. So we definitely listen to our customers, and that informs us. And then we do have a merchandising team who like they just like put together the Halloween. They pitched me on like, hey, here's what we're thinking for Halloween. It's these 10 things, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say like, oh, more of this, less of that, whatever. But they're always thinking a few months ahead and kind of, like we always, we want to roll out new stuff every month.
Joe, I was wondering, because when I first found out about it, to me, it seemed like you guys are a lot like a marketing company as well. You're marketing a lot of these products for these brands and these services or whatever it may be. How has that played a role in it for the companies that want to work with you guys?
Yeah, so we want to talk about experiences more than we do products, but we'll talk about products to the extent that we're like, hey, we specifically curated these products from these brands for this experience to like kind of tell a story.
Right.
So we put a lot of work into thinking about the like 15 or 20 or 30 things you wish you could do in a year. Like, in Southern California, for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to Coachella, and then I'm going to do one ski weekend, and my parents are going to visit, and I'm going to have friends from out of town this other weekend. We're going to do a beach day and a dinner party, and like, thinking about those moments and like thematically plugging them in against the calendar. So an example would be like one of our most famous bundles is a backyard movie night, and it's like screen, projector, popcorn machine, chairs. Like it's really fun. When it's Game of Thrones premiere, it's Game of Thrones premiere party, and it's like telling a story around this thing you might want to do and putting the right products against the calendar. And inspiring you to try things you thought were out of reach or you didn't even know you wanted to do, and setting that up is like a big part of our business.
It would be pretty cool to see like Joymode influencers come up with like some sort of like bucket list and then like have like all these things that they want.
Like curation's a big deal for us, and like whether it's internally or our customers or influencers, that's an area we're like continuing to invest more into.
Do you see yourself running Joymode for the next 20 years?
I think so. I mean, it's like a really fun set of challenges. We've got an amazing team. like, I think this can be a really important transformational company, the same way that like an Uber or an Airbnb have changed how we live, that we have that potential. So like that horizon sounds about right. Like it's going to take 20 years. So maybe don't want my wife to know I'd like to do this for 20 years.
Yeah,
but
Pat, maybe we'll just cut that part out.
Yeah, no, but it's... I would be very fortunate to get that opportunity.
And one thing that you said that I think stuck out a lot to me was the fact that this is one of the companies that you have to build slow to then grow fast, is that what you said? And I feel like companies like Uber, like Lyft, like Airbnb did the opposite. Like especially Uber. I mean, with the amount of money they raised, like, and they just tried to grow as fast as possible. And now it's like, how do we make money? Right. Like, how do we profit? Like, how is this a business? Because to me, this is like Uber's like less than it's like a no profit company. It's like not even a nonprofit. So, how do you measure, or how do you think about which company or what company should grow slow to scale faster?
Yeah. So I think if I was running Uber, if I was fortunate enough to have started Uber, I feel like they've basically played the right strategy, because like for them in a business where there's like it's such a network effect business between drivers and riders, and like market share is kind of everything. Just owning the market was like very valuable. Where our business, if you could build this business without having to own the inventory, it'd probably be a more similar strategy to Uber or Airbnb. But because we made the decision and the bet that owning the inventory was going to be the like big part of value creation, it creates a scenario though where it's a big moat from other people, but it creates a scenario where a lot can go wrong. So an example is you buy too much inventory, but you don't have enough customers. Yeah. You're screwed. You get too many customers, but you don't have enough inventory. You're screwed. You buy a ton of inventory, you get a ton of customers, but all that inventory breaks and it's the wrong inventory. You're screwed. So like all these things can go wrong. So it's been very like methodical, step by step, how we've thought about like, okay, how many customers can we support? How much inventory do we need? How do we keep laddering these things up in unison? And building towards a place where we feel confident that we can start stamping that out with more velocity in more cities. So yeah, that's like our goal, and where I feel like we're getting really close to.
Well, Joe, this has been an awesome conversation. I mean, I think I speak for both of us when I say we both love what you've created with both Klout and Joymode, but we're excited to see where Joymode goes from here, and how you guys expand to other cities and more experiences, and kind of just seeing where, because it's such an interesting space, and like you're saying, like the idea of just, I think, what is it, do more, own less? Is that your thing?
More, own less.
Do more, own less. It's amazing. Like who says like, you should be limited to the experiences that you can only afford to buy, right? Like it's crazy. So
the idea of a world where like you're only limited by your imagination, not what you own, is exciting to me.
100%. Thanks, Joe.
Cool. Thanks, you guys. Joe. Appreciate it.